The first time I heard that clip of Scream from Hell on the radio, I laughed so hard I almost crashed my car. I was on the ring road outside St. Petersburg, some late-night talk program playing in the background, and suddenly there was this high-pitched wailing like someone had mixed a slaughterhouse with a metal concert and shoved a microphone in the middle. The host said it was leaked audio from the Cola's super deep borehole, proof that we drilled into damnation. I barked out a laugh, so sharp my throat hurt. Not because it was funny, because I knew the sound was fake. We never recorded anything that clean. And because what we actually heard down there, you don't put that shit on the radio. You don't sleep afterward. You don't stay married afterward. You don't stay sane in quite the same way. They lied to you about why we stopped drilling. That's the part that really pisses me off. The budget cuts, the technical difficulties, the unexpected temperatures, all the careful phrases in all the official reports, like they were putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound and patting it dry. I know why we stopped. I was there when we woke it up. Back then, in '92, I thought I'd won the lottery. 23 years old, fresh out of university, half my classmates stuck grading papers or logging survey data in some bureaucrat's basement. Me? I get a call offering a junior geologist position on the Kola project itself. The deepest man-made hole on the planet. 12 kilometers straight down into the bones of the earth. The train ride up to Murmansk felt like a victory march. I remember pressing my forehead to the cold glass, watching endless black spruce slide past, thinking, I'm going to see something no one has ever seen. I'm going to touch rock that hasn't seen daylight since before there was anything walking on land. I was stupid enough to think that was a blessing. Kola itself is ugly as hell. The borehole isn't some vast sci-fi pit with glowing lights. It's a heavy metal plate in the middle of a squat concrete facility that smells like oil and damp coats. The air tastes like burnt metal and old tea bags. Even in summer, the wind knifes through you. The first day, Director Volkov did the official welcome. He was shorter than I expected, broad shoulders, hair already going silver at the temples. The sort of man who always looks like he's working out the square root of something in his head. You're here to work, he said, not even bothering with pleasantries. This isn't Moscow. No one cares how brilliant your thesis was. Don't die, don't break the equipment, and don't put anything in the hole that doesn't belong there. He didn't smile. Nobody did. The only one who looked remotely friendly was Dmitri, a drilling tech with a crooked nose and a laugh that carried through walls. He clapped me on the shoulder in the canteen. Don't mind Volkov, he said. He hasn't slept properly since '79. Thinks the rocks are personally out to embarrass him. He winked, like that was a joke. At the time, I laughed. We were running the third phase of the project then, trying to push past 12,000 meters. Most of what we did was mind-numbingly routine. Check the readouts, swap drill bits, log core samples, drink coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through somebody's socks. The kind of repetitive work that starts to blur your sense of time. You measure your days by depth. Not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. 11,784 meters. 11,950. 12,010. The problem started around 12,000. You've probably heard the official line. We drilled too deep, it got too hot, the rocks misbehaved. There's a kernel of truth in that. At those depths, temperature and pressure get weird. Rock stops acting like rock and starts acting like something halfway to plastic. You expect anomalies. But the first time the drill came up with something alive, nobody had a good explanation. I wasn't in the room when they brought up that first warm core. That was night shift, 3 a.m., my eyes buried in seismic readings in the adjacent lab, trying to stay awake. The next morning, everyone was buzzed, talking too fast over breakfast. You see Azarov's face? One of the rig guys said. Like someone slapped his mother. What happened? I asked. Ask him, Dmitri said, grinning. You're the new golden boy. Maybe he'll actually answer you. I caught up with Dr. Azarov in the drill room between shifts. He was the senior geologist, tall and thin as a survey stake, glasses always sliding down his nose. He had a way of making you feel like a particularly disappointing rock sample. Sir, I said, try and sound professional and not like a kid asking for gossip. I heard you had an unusual core last night. He glanced over at me, eyes bloodshot from yet another night on shift. For a second, I thought he was going to ignore me. Then he sighed and gestured toward the examination table. They already put it back, he said. Of course they did. Wouldn't want Moscow to think anything interesting happens here. What was it? Granite, he said. Standard. Fine-grained. High quartz. Nothing special. He started to walk away. I must have made a face because he stopped. And I pushed. And it was warm, he said. Not hot. Warm. Like you picked it up from a person, not a whole 12 kilometers down. I remember actually laughing. Residual friction from the bit. That's what they said, he muttered. That's what they always say. Friction. Instrument error. Contamination. He turned, fixing me with his flat stare. The sample took almost an hour to come up. We've never had one arrive above ambient before. Not once. You think friction is that selective? I didn't have an answer. I mumbled something about checking the logs. He waved me off and went to harass a technician. That should have been the first red flag. Instead, we wrote it up as slight thermal anomaly and moved on. 3 days later, I was on shift in the drilling room when we heard the scratching. We had this set up with microphones and accelerometers we'd lower periodically, not right at the drill head, but close enough to pick up tectonic noise. Groans, microquakes, the slow shifting of ancient plates. For a geologist, that sound is like music, proof that the planet is still moving under you, even when everything looks frozen. We were at 12,200 meters that night. It was the dead hour, 3:47 a.m., fluorescent lights buzzing, everyone running on caffeine and inertia. I was half asleep at the console, pretending to check a graph I'd already memorized when the speakers made this soft, dry sound. The closest thing I can compare it to is a mouse inside a wall. Just this faint, irregular rasping. Turn that up, I said. The tech at the audio console, Lena, frowned and twisted the knob. The noise swelled. Scrape, pause. Scrape, pause. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Shit, she said. That's not rock noise. She was right. It wasn't the low rumble of bedrock shifting or the clean ping of microfractures. It was high-pitched and weirdly close, like someone dragging their fingernails over a slate right behind the microphone. Volkov came in, eyes narrow. He could smell tension the way other people smell smoke. Problem? He asked. Listen, I said. He stepped closer. The room had gone quiet. Every little beep and clank in the background seemed indecently loud against that steady, deliberate scratching. Equipment malfunction, he said finally. Kill the recording. Bring the package up. He sounded bored, but his face had gone this color I'd never seen on him before, like all the blood had gone into hiding. Lena tapped the controls. Winch online. Retrieving. We all watched the depth counter on the winch display. 12,200, 12,150, 12,100. The cable made that familiar humming sound through the pulleys. At 8,000 meters, the counter froze. Jum, Lena muttered. She tapped the panel again. The cable twitched. The hum changed pitch. Then the numbers started going the wrong way. 8,050, 8,100, 8,150. What the fuck? Dmitri said from behind me. The winch motor whined as it tried to hold. The whole assembly shuddered as the cable went taut, vibrating like a plucked string. I could see in the overhead pulleys the way it jerked like someone below had grabbed the line and was pulling hand over hand. Emergency brake, Volkov snapped. Lena hit the big red button. The brake slammed. The lights above us flickered as the system dumped power. For a second, the cable held. And then, with a sound like a gunshot, it didn't. The tension vanished. The winch spun freely with a screaming metallic whine, the severed end of the cable whipping up and slamming into the ceiling, scattering dust and paint chips. I flinched back. What is our cable rated to? Volkov said quietly. 5 tons, Lena whispered. Give or take. Nobody touches the controls, Volkov said. Log everything. I want every second of that recording copied and copied again. and I don't want anyone mentioning this offsite. Do you understand? We all nodded. Nobody argued. There are jokes you make after a near miss, the kind of bravado that keeps you from shaking apart. Nobody made them. We should have stopped then, shut it all down, gone home, let the whole sit there like a bad memory. Instead, the morning teleconference with Moscow happened. I wasn't in the room. Junior staff don't get invited to those. But the wall between the conference room and the lab was thin as cardboard, and Volkov wasn't exactly a quiet speaker when he got angry. You didn't hear it, he was saying. It's not geological. It's not seismic. I don't know what it is, and that's exactly my point. Pause. Muffled, bureaucratic monotone from a speakerphone. Yes, we lost the microphone, Volkov snapped. Yes, the cable snapped, because something pulled it. Another pause. Another monotone sentence. A few clipped words. You want actionable data? Volkov said. Here is your data. We are sitting on top of a hole 12 kilometers deep, and we just dangled a fucking hook down it. And something tugged back. How much more data do you need? Shorter pause this time. Whatever Moscow said, it made his shoulders sag. Understand, he said finally, voice flat. We continue. He came out of that call looking 10 years older. He saw me standing there with my clipboard and jerked his chin. You, he said, you're on the night shift again. Everyone else, rotate as planned. And if you hear that noise again, you tell me before you tell anyone else. Director, I said before I could stop myself. Do you think it's a fault? Some kind of cavity opening up down there? He stared at me for a very long moment. Then he did something I never saw him do before or since. He lied straight to my face. Geology, he said, waving a hand like the word itself was an irritation. It's always geology in the end. He walked away before I could answer. At 12,250 meters, the drill bit jammed. Not stuck, jammed. Anyone who's ever worked a drill, even a handheld one, knows the difference. You can feel it. Stuck is resistance, rock pushing back. Jammed is something else, like a hand reaching up and grabbing the bit. We were driving the drill through granite, making good time, everything running smooth. I remember the steady growl of the motor, a kind of background rumble you stop noticing after a while. I was at the log station, half scribbling, half daydreaming about a hot shower and a bed that didn't smell like diesel when the sound changed. The motor didn't slow. It choked. The whole structure vibrated with this ugly, grinding sensation. The torque meter spiked right off the scale. The drill string groaned. Back it off, Azarov barked. He'd wandered in despite being off shift. I think he'd stopped sleeping too by then. The engineer on the controls feathered the system, trying to ease the bit back a few meters. The motor screamed. The smell of hot metal filled the room. Kill it, Volkov said. Now. The engineer flicked the power cutoff. The motor wound down reluctantly, like something was still holding it in motion from below. For 6 hours, we tried to free that bit. Start, reverse, start again, all within safe torque limits. Every time we hit 12,250, it locked up, like there was a vise at that depth that only closed when we touched it. By hour 6, everyone was wired tight. Arguments snapped in whispers across the control room. String's going to shear if we keep this up. We can't lose another tool. Moscow will crucify us. I don't give a shit about Moscow. I care about not dropping 50 tons of scrap down a hole we can't clean. Maybe we should. No one finished their sentences. No one wanted to be the one to say stop drilling. In the end, physics made the decision for us. There was this sudden sharp lurch from below, like something letting go. The drill string jolted. The derrick shuddered so violently that a wrench on a rack across the room jumped, clattered to the floor, and skittered away. Bit's free, the controls engineer said weakly. We all exhaled at once like a lung. They hauled that drill string up meter by meter. When the bit finally swung into the rig floor, heavy and dripping with drilling mud, everyone who could walk came to look at it. To the untrained eye, it probably looked fine. Metal scuffed, some scoring on the teeth where it had chewed rock. But that scoring wasn't right. Tungsten carbide, doesn't mark easily. You can run it through granite for days, and it'll come back shiny. This bit had grooves in it. Long, parallel grooves cut clean and deep into the metal, curling around the circumference in a lazy arc. We all stared. No one said it, but we were all thinking the same words. Claw marks. Azarov reached out like he was going to touch one of the grooves, then seemed to think better of it. He snapped his fingers at the tech with the camera. "Get video," he said. "Macro shots. All angles." Volkov picked up a clipboard. His hands were trembling. The pen scratched out something on a line-marked tool where, "We'll log it as abrasive interaction with an unidentified inclusion," he said, "until we know more." Dmitri snorted. "Unidentified inclusion, my ass. Do you have a better term?" Volkov snapped. Dmitri opened his mouth, then glanced at the security camera in the corner and shut it again. Nobody wanted to say teeth out loud. That night, Dmitri disappeared. He was on the drilling floor with me at the start of the shift. I remember him complaining about the coffee, making obscene jokes about Moscow bureaucrats, throwing a rag at my head while I rolled my eyes. He was fine, normal, annoyingly cheerful. Shift turnover at midnight is always chaos. People filing in and out, clipboards changing hands, the drill humming along. Nobody noticed at first that Dmitri didn't come up with the rest of the crew. It was only around 0:40 when Lena frowned at the roster and said, "Where's Dmitri?" We checked the locker room. His coat was hanging there, the sleeve still turned inside out from when he'd yanked it off. His thermos sat on the bench, lit off, steam still curling from it. "Maybe he went to the bathroom," someone said. Nobody likes bringing the whole rig to a stop for a bathroom break, but rules are rules. Safety check. Head count. We checked the toilets. Empty. "Maybe he went to the generator shed," someone else said. We checked there too. Nothing. After half an hour of hunting, using words like misplaced and confused and left early, we stopped bullshitting ourselves. There's only one place you can really go missing in a facility like that. "Drill floor," Volkov said. "Now, everyone." We stood around the borehole, the big circular opening in the middle of the rig floor where the drill string vanished into darkness. Normally, it was covered by a rotating table, mud splashing, tools clanking. Right then, it looked like an open mouth. "Winch," Volkov said. "Lower the inspection camera." We didn't keep that camera for fun. People had nightmares about exactly the thing we were doing. The little camera unit was a metal cylinder with stabilizing fins and a ring of LEDs around its lens. It hummed softly as it descended on its own cable. The monitor flickered as it passed, meter by meter, down the shaft. At first, all you see is concrete and steel, the lined walls of the upper shaft. Then bare rock. Then just darkness with the halo of the LEDs pushing it back a few meters at a time. "Depth?" Volkov asked. 50 meters, Lena said quietly. Her fingers were tight on the controls. "Keep going." 60, 70. The cable hissed softly. "Nothing," someone muttered. "Maybe he..." "Shut up," Volkov said. At 100 meters, I started to let myself hope. Maybe Dmitri had just walked off. Maybe he did a breakdown, gone to town to get drunk, anything. At 200 meters, the camera image stuttered. "Hold," Lena said. "Something on the lens." "Wipe it," Azarov muttered automatically, then caught himself. There was no wipe at that depth. The picture refocused. For a second, all I saw was rock, gray and coarse-grained. Then the camera swayed slightly, and I saw Dmitri. He was on the wall, not at the bottom, broken, not hanging from the cable. His body was pressed flat against the granite like a man hugging a cliff, only there was nothing to hold on to. No ledges, no hardware, nothing. His fingers were splayed wide, jammed into tiny cracks that weren't there the last time we ran the camera. He looked like he was trying to crawl deeper. Not up, deeper. Head angled down, face toward the darkness. "Jesus," someone whispered. His fingers... Christ. He tore his nails off. All 10. The beds of his fingers were raw meat, grinding against the stone. Even over the shitty resolution of the camera, You could see the blood smeared down the rock in long streaks. Is he? Lena couldn't finish. The medical officer, called up from the infirmary, leaned in. Eyes open, he said, pupils fixed. That amount of blood loss in this temperature. I would say no. No, he's not alive. Then why is the blood still wet? I said. Nobody answered, but no one looked away from the screen either. Bring him up, Volkov said, voice hoarse. You can't just bring someone up from a vertical shaft. We had to rig a harness, lower a rescuer down to secure the body. The guy who volunteered was a climber from maintenance, Mikhail, the kind of asshole who'd free solo radio towers when he was drunk. Clip me, he said, jaw tight. I'll get him. It took an hour to rig properly. The wind outside picked up, making the whole facility moan. We watched Mikhail descend on the secondary cable, a bobbing shadow on the monitor, getting closer and closer to where Dmitri clung to the wall. 2 meters, Lena said quietly. 1. The camera showed Mikhail's gloved hand reaching out. He touched Dmitri's shoulder. Dmitri didn't move. By the time Mikhail got him into the harness and onto the stretcher, the medical officer had stopped wasting words like maybe. I helped lift the stretcher when they brought him up. His body was stiff, heavier than it should have been. His jaw had locked. His lips were caked with pale dust. I leaned in despite myself. It looked like he'd eaten chalk. Stone, the medic said, following my gaze. He's got rock dust all the way back in his throat. We'll confirm in the autopsy. Why would he do that? I whispered. Because he was trying to go deeper, Azarov said quietly from behind me. And there was only one way left. We all shut up after that. The official report said he died around 2000 hours, slipping and falling while performing unauthorized maintenance. A tragique accident. Lessons learned. Safety protocols reinforced. We knew better. The medic said rigor mortis placed his death around 2000 hours, sure. But when we pulled him up, his skin was still barely warm under the frozen air of the shaft. His blood hadn't set. There was something wrong with the timing, the same way there had been something wrong with that warm granite core. The last thing I'll tell you about Dmitri is what we found on the wall behind where he'd been. Once they got his body out of the way, we lowered the camera again, trying to figure out what he'd been clinging to. The granite was rougher there, gouged. It took a second for my brain to make sense of it. The letters were too big to see all at once. 3 strokes per line, crude, uneven. He wrote something, Lena said, voice shaking. She panned the camera. On the shaft wall, in smeared, drying blood, letters half a meter tall, it said. They heard. That was the first time I thought about quitting. Not quietly transferring out. Not asking for a different assignment. Just walking out into the snow until my lungs froze and I didn't have to think about any of it ever again. Volkov went the other way. He went into overdrive. Seal it, he said. We're done. This project is finished as of this hour. Give me Moscow. He didn't wait for the teleconference this time. He grabbed the phone in his office and hammered the keys like they'd insulted his mother. They're not going to like this, Azarov said quietly. They never like anything, Volkov growled. They can add it to the list. I hovered in the doorway like an idiot because whatever vague respect I'd had for chain of command had been eaten by the thing gnawing at my spine. I heard the connection click, the distant hum of a line, then a voice, thin and metallic. Central Operations, it said. Go ahead. This is Director Volkov at Kola, he said. We're suspending drilling operations effective immediately due to... The voice cut him off. It spoke for a long time. I couldn't hear everything, just little fragments. Overreaction, already invested. Political consequences. You sent men up here with families, Volkov snapped. One of them clawed his way 200 meters down a vertical shaft. He ate rock, and before he did it, he wrote, "They heard" on the wall. Do you have any idea what that means? A pause. Fuck your data, Volkov hissed. We're sealing it. Send whoever you like to fire me afterward. He slammed the phone back in its cradle so hard the whole desk jumped. That was the only time I ever saw him lose his temper. They sent people, all right, but not to fire him. They arrived the next day in an unmarked Me-8 helicopter. For men in gray coats, clean boots, not a fleck of drilling mud on them. They carried metal cases and radiation badges and an attitude like they were already bored. One of them flashed some kind of ID at the gate guard. I didn't see exactly which agency. I did see the way the guard shut up mid-sentence and waved them through. From Moscow, I asked Volkov. They're from wherever the money comes from, he said. That's all you need to know. They didn't introduce themselves to the staff. They didn't join us in the canteen. They moved through the facility in a little self-contained cloud, speaking quietly into their radios, checking wall thicknesses and structural supports, measuring the diameter of the shaft opening. Nobody made jokes about hell or demons anymore. If anyone said sounds of hell, now, it was only after 3 vodkas and with their voice shaking. The men from Moscow decided we weren't just shutting down the operation. We were burying it. They rolled in a steel plate the thickness of my hand, cut in a perfect circle to fit over the borehole. The welders stood near it like nervous priests, masks under their arms. We'll need to lower one more package before the seal, one of the gray coats said. Another microphone? Volkov asked, disgust curling his lip. Something like that, the man said. He didn't elaborate. This is insane, Azarov muttered to me aside, his voice barely above a breath. We've lost one man already. Now, they want more recordings? For what? To make sure it's really there, I whispered. He looked at me like I'd slapped him, then looked away. I wasn't supposed to be in the equipment room when they sent that last microphone down. Officially, I'd been ordered off shift, told to get some rest before the debriefings the Greycoats had planned for us. Unofficially, nobody was keeping very good track of anyone by then. There's a little observation booth looking onto the drill floor, glass smeared with years of oil and fingerprints. I slipped in there and shut the door gently, the squeak lost under the clamp of boots and the hiss of welding gear being tested. They'd rigged a new cable over the shaft, this one thinner, smoother, a synthetic braid gleaming pale against the grime of the rig. At the end of it hung a different device than our usual geophone assembly, a compact metal cylinder with fins and a cage around it. A high-end microphone, self-powered. One of the Greycoats checked its readouts, nodded once, and gave a clipped order. The winch started turning. The microphone slipped down into the hole, out of sight. In the equipment room, a junior tech I didn't recognize sat at a console with headphones on, eyes wide, one hand hovering over the playback controls. I crouched beside him before he could tell me to leave. You're not supposed to, he started. Shut up, I said. If they catch you, blame me. He hesitated, then shrugged minutely and turned his attention back to the readouts. The feed was recording to 3 separate tapes and a digital backup, all ticking over in perfect sync. A tiny line on the monitor showed sound levels, little humps of noise from the winch motor, the faint whine of air moving in the shaft. For the first 11,000 meters, there was nothing else. Silence isn't quite the right word. There was always some background hiss, a deep, distant rumble of the planet doing its slow-motion grind. But no scratching, no voices, nothing that made my skin crawl. Depth, one of the Greycoats called. 11,800, the text said. Volkov stood with his hands on the back of the chair, knuckles white. At 12,000 meters, the scratching started again. It was louder this time, clearer. The microphone was better, I guess, and it was going straight down, not trailing behind a giant rotating drill string. The sound came through the speakers like it was right there in the room. Scrape, 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 scrape. Not random, not like pebbles falling or gear teeth skipping. It had rhythm, intent. The tech flinched and yanked his headphones off. I grabbed them before they fell, pressed them to my ears. It's hard to explain why it sounded wrong. Plenty of things scrape. Rodents, insects, metal rock. You hear that enough working with drills, you stop noticing. It was like 1,000 people in a small space, each trying to scratch their way out through the same wall. Depth? Volkov asked, his voice steady only because he was forcing it to be. 12,070, the text said. 75, 80. As we went deeper, more of the scratching joined in. You could hear layers, some slow and heavy, some fast and skittering. It got so dense it turned into a single, grinding roar, and still you could pick out individual patterns inside it if you focused. At 12:02, we lost the last microphone. One of the gray coats said quietly, "Keep going," another replied. At 12,200, everything went quiet. Not just the scratching. The background rumble cut out too. For a heartbeat, I thought the equipment had died. The line on the monitor went flat. "Did it disconnect?" the tech whispered. "No," I said. My own voice sounded strange in my ears. "Listen." Silence. Deep enough that you could hear your own pulse in your head. Then something breathed. I'm not talking about the sound of air moving in the shaft or the echo of the winch. This was close. Vet. You know the sound someone makes when they've just surfaced from underwater and suck in air like it's the only thing keeping them alive? It was like that multiplied by 100, maybe 1,000 all at once. They inhaled together. They exhaled together. Every hair on my arm stood up. I lowered the headphones a fraction, and I could still hear it coming from the speakers in the room, tinny and distorted and terrifying. "What is that?" the tech hissed. Recording, one of the gray coats said calmly, like he was noting the weather. "Maintain depth." The breathing went on for maybe 10 seconds. Then it changed. The first laugh was soft, a kind of low chuckle that could almost have been human if you'd recorded it through 3 layers of walls and a bad microphone. Then more voices joined in. They laughed in unison. That's the part that broke my brain a little. People laughed differently. Different rhythms, different pitches, different little gasps and snorts. This laughter was perfect synchronization, like one voice layered 1,000 times. It started low, then it climbed higher and higher, this shrieking, giddy sound full of something that wasn't joy. It was like listening to starving dogs watching someone open a butcher's shop. "Cut the feed," Volkov said. "No," the gray coat in charge said sharply. "Do not touch that switch. This isn't a fucking lab experiment," Volkov snapped. "We have people here, and you'll have more if you let us finish," the man said. "We need to know what we're dealing with." The laughter reached a pitch that made my teeth ache. The line on the monitor was a solid block of noise. Then there was a new sound layered under it. A metallic whine, rising rapidly. "They're pulling on the line," the tech said. "Something's pulling it down." The winch screamed, the motor housing rattling. You could feel the vibration through the floor, through the soles of your boots, up into your bones. "Secure it," Volkov yelled. One of the gray coats shouted something into his radio. The winch operator slammed the brake. For a second, it held. Then the tension numbers spiked, and the whole assembly lurched forward as the cable began to pay out anyway, metal squealing in protest. The synthetic braid made this horrible high keening as it whipped around the drum. On the speakers, above the shrilling of abused machinery, the laughter got louder. Closer. You could hear other sounds now, too, scrabbling, scraping like 1,000 hands finding purchase on rock. "Depth," someone shouted. "Still at 12.2, the text said. "No, wait, it's..." The readout ticked rapidly. 12,200, 12,150, 12,100. "It's coming up," I whispered. The laughter changed. It became words. I don't care how good your Russian is, you've never heard numbers pronounced this way. Every syllable was sharp enough to cut. It echoed in that same layered chorus, the sound of a crowd shouting a countdown at the new year, except the tone was so hungry it made my stomach cramp. "Dvanad sat Tysiak, 12,000. The words slammed into the speakers so hard they crackled. The cable rattled. 12,000, 11,900, 11,800. Odinad sat Tysiak, 11,000. They were counting up, but the number was going down, climbing toward us. "Stop the winch," Volkov yelled. "It's not the winch," the operator shouted back, panic finally cracking his composure. "I've killed power, it's still moving." 9,000. The voices overlapped, ecstatic. Between each number, that manic laughter tore through the room again, bouncing off concrete, burrowing into my skull. The whole platform started to shake. Dust drifted down from the ceiling in lazy curtains. Somewhere, equipment crashed to the floor. People were shouting, their words lost in the roar. 8,000, 7,000. Someone next to me vomited. The stench hit the hot, oily air, and I realized it was me a second later while burning my throat. 6,000, 5,000. I could hear another voice now, small and tinny through the open office door behind us. The speakerphone in Volkov's office. Someone in Moscow saying, "We're picking it up here too. What the hell are you people doing up there?" 4,000, 3,000. The winch casing exploded. That's the only way to describe it. The bolts holding it down sheared off, and the drum spun so fast the cable blurred, shrieking. Then, with a sound like ribs snapping, the braid tore loose from its mount. The free end of the cable shot up out of the borehole like a released spring, smashed lights, punched a hole in the ceiling, and came whipping down again in a shower of sparks. For a second, there was a weird, weightless quiet. The little microphone on the end of that cable was no longer 12,000 meters down. It was 200. On the speakers, the laughter hadn't even paused. It was deafening now, full body loud, like standing under cathedral bells when they all toll at once. And then the counting changed. Sorok 3, Sorok 2, Sorok Odin, 43, 42, 41. I didn't understand at first. My brain was still stuck on depths and meters. Then my stomach dropped. There were 43 people in the facility. 43, including the gray coats. Including me. It wasn't counting the distance anymore. It was counting us. Seal it, Volkov bellowed. Right now. Plate on, weld it, move. Nobody argued. We moved like puppets yanked by a single frantic hand. Welders sprinted in, dragging cables. Forklift screeched, bringing the steel plate over the mouth of the borehole. The edge of it rang against the metal floor. Sorok, Trit sat deviate. The voices were everywhere, not just in the speakers. The walls vibrated with them. The floor, the fucking air in my lungs. I could feel each number like a tap on the inside of my skull. The plate swung into position. For a heartbeat, it hovered over the black mouth of the hole. 12. I don't know which number we were on by then. I'd lost track. The numbers blurred into each other, overlapping, hysterical. The plate dropped with a metallic boom that rattled my teeth. The sound of the borehole being covered was like a door slamming on a scream. Welders fell on it, arcs flaring blinding white as they started stitching metal to metal. Keep going, Volkov shouted. Forget your eyes, just weld. From under the plate, the voices kept shouting. Dve, Odna. There was a final peal of laughter so loud it made the lights blow. Then something hit the underside of the plate. The entire platform jumped. You could see the steel flex, the center of the plate buckling upward like something enormous had slammed its fist against it from below. Welders stumbled, cursed, kept going. Another impact, another buckling groan. You could see the welds tearing in little sparks along the edge. Faster, someone screamed. The counting had stopped. Now there were just words, too many overlapping to catch, language breaking down under whatever was forcing it through. And then, abruptly, the hammering stopped. Silence fell like a dropped blanket. The welders hesitated, arcs sputtering. Don't stop, Volkov said, voice raw. Finish it. That's when we heard the scraping. Slow, deliberate, metal on metal. It started at one edge of the plate and crept inward, 3 parallel lines dragging across the underside. You could feel it through the soles of your boots, this faint, shivering vibration like fingers testing a lock. The microphones were still live. Nobody had turned them off. The room was quiet enough now that we could hear the sound coming up through the steel, the audio feed catching it and feeding it back out, doubled and ghostly. Then, from far below, muffled but perfectly clear, in that same horrifyingly synchronized chorus, we heard a single word. Skoro. Soon. My Russian is native. That word has never sounded as cold as it did then. The welders finished the final seam. The last bright line of molten metal cooled, faded to dull red, then black. And just like that, the voices stopped. The official story says the Kola super deep borehole was shut down in 1992 because the temperatures at depth were higher than expected, making drilling technically unfeasible and economically pointless. That's what the papers said. That's what the public heard. A tidy little story about science hitting a wall. In reality, we didn't hit a wall. We hit something that knocked back. They brought in concrete mixers the next day, poured a thick slab over the steel plate, then another thinner plate on top of that, for good measure. You can still see the spot if you somehow find your way onto the abandoned site. It looks like any other rusted metal disc in a forgotten yard. While the concrete set, the gray coats did their rounds. We each got called into a little office one by one. There was a man from Moscow, another from some security service, I never did get which one, and Volkov sitting stiff in the corner, looking like he'd swallowed a barbed wire fence. The questions were always the same. What did you see? What did you hear? Had you ever experienced auditory hallucinations before? Did you have any history of mental illness? Did you understand that the phenomena might have been a product of stress and sensory overload? Then they slid the papers across the desk. Non disclosure agreements. Thick paragraphs of legalese that boiled down to talk and will ruin you. Or worse, they offered money too. Generous pensions for those who wanted to retire early. Retraining programs elsewhere for those who didn't. References. Favors. A smooth path away from the hole and everything it implied. I signed. I like to pretend I agonized over it, that I made some heroic stand, refused to be silenced. But sitting there, the smell of burnt metal still burned into my clothes, my hands still faintly trembling. I would have signed anything they put in front of me if it meant I never had to hear that laugh again. Moscow decided the safest thing to do was pretend Kola had simply run its course. They shut down the facility, mothballed the equipment, let the buildings rot in the Arctic wind. They wrote a few papers about unexpected crustal temperatures. They moved on to other projects. For a while, I tried to move on too. I left the North, took a job in St. Petersburg with an environmental consulting firm, met a woman, got married, had a daughter, ordinary life, or something like it. For the first year or two, I could almost convince myself that what happened at Kola had been not a hallucination exactly, but some freak acoustic event. A convergence of rock noise and equipment malfunction. My brain filling in patterns. The mind is good at lying to itself when it wants to. Then, 3 weeks after we sealed the hole, something happened in the town of Zapolyarny. You won't find it in any official report linked to Kola. On paper, it was a minor industrial accident, a collapsed exploratory well for a water line. 1 fatality, 1 injured, some minor damage. I know what really happened because one of the contractors was an old drinking buddy of Dimitri's. He called me, his voice thin and crackling over a terrible line, whispering like someone might be listening. We were drilling out past the town, he said, looking for a better groundwater source. About 400 meters down, the bit just dropped, like there was nothing below it. Cavity, I asked, my skin already going cold. Sure, he said. That's what the report says. We hit a void. Only, when we pulled the bit back up, it was chewed up. It's fucking carbide. You know how hard it is to mark that. There were grooves in it. Curved grooves like something grabbed it and twisted. My mouth went dry. Did you hear anything? I asked. He was quiet for a long time. We lowered a camera, he said finally. The kind with the little LEDs. Just like you guys used up there. It went down into the dark, maybe 20 meters before we saw arms. I don't know how many. It was like a nest of centipedes made of meat. They were climbing up the walls toward the lens. We pulled it so fast we almost lost the cable. I leaned against my kitchen counter, the laminate cool under my palm. My wife was in the next room, singing to our daughter. The song sounded like it was coming from another planet. What did you do? I whispered. What do you think? He said. We filled the hole. Concrete. Rebar. Same as you. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Funny thing, he added. When we were packing up, there was a group from Murmansk already on their way. So they got a call, like they were expecting it. That was the second hole. There were more. Nickel, a site near Murmansk. A collapsed mine access that never made the news because the company that owned it had friends in the right ministries. Each story came to me third hand through the old Cola rumor network. A hole where there hadn't been one before. A bit that came up scarred with familiar curve grooves. A camera feed that showed too many limbs or eyes or nothing at all except a blur of motion rushing the lens. Every time they sealed it, steel and concrete. The same reflexive reaction like slamming doors in a burning house. For a long time, the hole stayed up there in the north. In my nightmares, in the white spaces on the map, in the places people already thought of as godforsaken. That was tolerable in a way, like the problem had boundaries. Then, last month, my daughter called me from Moscow. She's grown now, lives in a cramped little apartment off the ring road, works in an office doing something with numbers I don't really understand. We talk every week. This time, she called in the middle of the day, her voice thin and too high. "Papa," she said, "they're evacuating our building." My stomach turned to ice. "Why? What happened?" "Fire. There's a crack in the foundation," she said. "It opened overnight. It's weird. Perfectly straight. It goes down, I don't know how far. They say at least 50 meters. Maybe more." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles hurt. "Are you out of the building?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "We're standing outside. The emergency workers won't let us go near the tape." "Good," I said automatically. "That's good. Stay away. Just stay away, do you hear me?" She was quiet. "There's another thing," she said finally. "This is going to sound crazy." I closed my eyes. "Tell me," I said. When it was quiet just now, before the truck showed up, she said, "I went closer. I know I shouldn't have. I just wanted to see. The crack is narrow at the top, but it widens. And when I leaned over, I thought I heard something. My heart hammered in my throat." "What did you hear?" I asked. She swallowed audibly through the phone. "Scratching," she said, like something was trying to climb up. The line hummed between us. I realized I was shaking. "Get away from it," I said. "Go stay with your aunt for a while. I'll come to Moscow. Tonight. Don't go back to that building. Promise me." She tried to joke. "Papa, you're scaring me." "Good," I said. "I'd rather you be scared than curious. Promise me." She promised. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at the grain in the wood, listening to my old apartment's pipes groan as someone flushed a toilet upstairs. It sounded like something moving inside the walls. 3 days ago, I felt my own floor vibrate. Just a little at first. A tremor so gentle I might have written it off as heavy traffic outside or the neighbors dragging furniture. But the tremors kept happening. Little shivers at random times, cups rattling, dust sifting down from the overhead light. I told myself it was old plumbing. Settling. Anything. This morning, there was a crack in my basement floor. Only a centimeter wide. Perfectly straight. Looking down into it, I saw nothing. Just darkness. When I pressed my ear to the concrete, the cold burned my skin. It sounded like digging. Getting closer. At first I convinced myself I was imagining it. Telling you this now, it sounds stupid, but in the moment, you latch onto whatever explanation keeps your world from tilting. Basements settle, old Soviet concrete cracks, pipes rattle. Normal things. So I stare at that narrow black line in the floor until my eyes watered. Then I went back upstairs, made coffee I didn't drink, sat at the table, and told myself I'd check again in an hour. I lasted 15 minutes. The basement smelled different the second time. Colder. You know that mineral chill you get standing in a deep stairwell, like the air hasn't been breathed in a long time? It was like that. Damp, metallic, with a faint tang of something like burned insulation. The crack was wider. Not much. 2 centimeters maybe. You'd say I misremembered the first measurement. I thought the same thing. So I did what any geologist would do. I measured it properly. Found an old folding ruler in my toolbox, kneeled down, hands shaking just enough to make the metal rattle, and laid it across. 1.8 centimeters. I wrote the number in the dust on the floor with my finger. 1.8, like if I documented it, it would become less insane. Then I did the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. I lay flat on the concrete, pressed my ear to the floor again, and listened. The cold went straight through my skull. The digging sound was still there and closer. Not just a vague scuffing now. I could pick out different rhythms. Something heavy chipping at rock. Something smaller, faster scrabbling. A faint, distant scraping like nails on glass. I jerked back so fast I cracked my head on the underside of the stairs. Fuck, I hissed, clutching the bump. My heart was crashing against my ribs. I went upstairs and grabbed my phone. I didn't even have to look up Volkov's number. I never deleted it. It rang, and rang, and rang. Each beep made the sound in my basement seem louder, even from 2 floors up. Finally, his old voicemail kicked in, the same gruff recording he'd had for years. Leave it. If it's important, I'll call back. He didn't. I tried his landline. No answer. I tried again an hour later. Nothing. By late afternoon, I called him 9 times. No answer. No call back. No message. In all the years since Cola, Volkov had never ignored my calls. Sometimes he'd answer drunk, sometimes exhausted, sometimes clearly in the middle of something and swearing under his breath. But he always picked up. We were bound by something ugly and shared. That's not the kind of bond you screen. I went back down to the basement at dusk. The crack measured 3 centimeters. It had a shape now, too, not just a line. It traced a nearly perfect circle in the middle of the floor, maybe 1.5 meters across. Like someone had drawn the outline of a manhole cover and then, very carefully, started cutting. The digging was constant, not frantic, steady, patient. I went upstairs and packed a bag. I don't remember making the decision exactly. One moment, I was staring at my old winter coat hanging on the back of the chair. The next, I was stuffing socks and underwear, my passport, and the Cola NDA folder into a duffel like my apartment was on fire. When your brain hits a certain level of fear, it goes very calm. All the noise shuts off. You just do. I locked the apartment door behind me out of habit, even though I knew how stupid that was, and took the stairs 2 at a time. The stairwell smell hit me halfway down, damp concrete and mold and something else, something that made my tongue tingle. On the landing below mine, Mrs. Ivanova was standing barefoot in her doorway, clutching a mug of tea in both hands. Her hair was in curlers. She was staring down at the floor. "Do you feel it?" she asked without looking up. "Feel what?" I said, though I already knew. "The trembling," she said. Her tea rippled, tiny concentric circles. "Like a train, but there's no train. It's just the pipes," I heard myself say. "The building is old." She finally looked up at me. Her eyes were huge and shiny. "The pipes don't laugh," she whispered. I almost dropped my bag. "What?" I said. She shook her head like she regretted saying anything. "Nothing. Go, go. You young people are always in a hurry." Her door clicked shut. I stood there for a second, listening. For once, the building was silent. No TV murmurs, no kids running, no distant music. Just this low, almost inaudible vibration under my feet. I left. I drove out of the city like the devil was pacing me. It was already dark, wet snow spitting from sky the color of old dishwater. The freeway lights turned everything sickly yellow. My hands were locked on the steering wheel, so hard my knuckles ached. Volkov lived about 40 minutes outside St. Petersburg, in one of those weird, not-quite suburbs. An old dacha village half swallowed by new construction. When I pulled onto his street, most of the houses were dark. It was that dead late evening hour where everyone's either watching TV or passed out. His front gate was open. That was wrong. Volkov was a paranoid bastard. He locked everything. Gates, doors, drawers, his briefcase, his liquor cabinet. He'd probably have locked his own fridge if he could. Seeing that gate standing there, half ajar, made my stomach twist. I parked crooked in front of his fence and left the engine running. The snow here was thinner, patchy. My boots crunched over old frost as I walked up the path. The porch light was off. The house was dark. The front door was open too. Not swinging or broken, just open. A narrow slice of darkness into the hallway. Volkov. I called, my voice sounding way too loud. It's me. I almost said Kola, but bit it back. It's Sergey. No answer. I stepped inside. The heat was off. That was the second wrong thing. Even when he went away, Volkov left his radiators on low. He'd lectured me more than once about burst pipes and winter damage. The air in the hallway felt like the inside of a fridge. Cold, still, with that flat, faintly dusty smell of a space that's been suddenly vacated. Volkov. I called again. Silence. His kitchen was to the right, through a wooden door with frosted glass panels. A thin line of darker dark showed at the bottom. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I don't know why I went toward it. Instinct says you should leave, call the police, pretend you never saw any of this. But something in me needed to know, needed to see, like a tongue probing a sore tooth. I pushed the kitchen door open. His table was overturned, one leg snapped. Chairs scattered. A pot lay on its side in the middle of the floor. Soup congealed around it like blood. The back window was shut, curtains half torn off, hanging crooked. And in the middle of the linoleum, in front of the sink, there was a hole. Not a messy collapse. Not broken tiles and jagged edges. A perfect circle, maybe 1.5 meters across, bored straight down through flooring and foundation and whatever else was beneath, into darkness. The edges were clean and smooth, like something hot and precise had cut them. I could see layers, linoleum, concrete, dirt, then rock. The darkness swallowed everything below that. The smell coming out of it hit me a second later. Hot stone and wet rust and something else, something animal. It smelled like the cola drill mud on bad days. It smelled like the air in the shaft when we pulled Dmitri up. On the wall above the sink, something was written in big, smeared letters. For a second, my brain refused to process it. The strokes were finger-thick, dark and glossy where they dried in rivulets. The words tilted slightly, like whoever wrote them had been losing strength, sliding down. We heard you too. I stood there, trembling, my breath too loud in my own ears. There was something else too. Little spatters on the cabinets, the counter, the fridge. A smear on the door frame at about shoulder height, like a hand had grabbed it and been pulled away. Volkov, I whispered. He wasn't there. No body on the floor. No limbs sticking out of the hole. No sign of where he'd gone except the overturned table, the spilled soup, and that message. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I flinched so hard I almost dropped it. The screen said, unknown number. Normally, I let those go to voicemail. This time I hit accept like it was a lifeline. Hello, I said. My voice cracked. Static. Then a voice I didn't recognize, male, clipped. Sergey, it said. Not a question. Who is this? I asked. We've been trying to reach you, the voice said. You haven't been answering your landline. My heart thudded. Who is this? I repeated. Think of us as your retirement committee, the man said dryly. We understand you visited the cola facility once, many years ago. I laughed. It came out high and a little wild. Is that what we're calling it now? I said. A visit. We need you to remain calm, the voice said, in that tone that guarantees you won't. There have been localized seismic events. We're monitoring the situation. We advise you to return to your home and await further instructions. I walked to the edge of the hole in Volkov's kitchen and looked down. The darkness was not empty. It felt thick, like something you could touch if you dared. The air rising from it was warm, humid. It moved in little pulses like breath. Is this one of your localized seismic events? I asked. There was a pause. Static crackled. I heard muffled conversation, like someone had covered the handset with their hand. Are you at home? The voice asked. No, I said. I'm at Volkov's. Another pause, longer. The director has been informed of the situation, the man said eventually. There is no need for you to involve yourself further. Go home, Sergey. Stay inside. Keep away from any structural damage. We'll send someone to talk to you. I stared at the words on the wall. We heard you too. Is that an order? I asked. Yes, he said. I hung up. I walked backward out of the kitchen, every instinct screaming at me not to turn my back on that hole. In the hallway, I grabbed the handle and slammed the door shut like a child shutting monsters in a closet. The frame shook. From behind the door, very faintly, I thought I heard something drag across the underside of the kitchen floor. 3 slow, parallel strokes. I ran. I don't remember going down the path or getting in the car. I remember fumbling the keys, my fingers numb, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The inside of the car smelled like old fast food and spilled coffee. Familiar. Safe. Ridiculously, I locked the doors. Then I just sat there, hands still on the keys, watching Volkov's dark house. I half expected to see him stagger out of the open gate, rubbing his head, calling me an idiot, or someone in a gray coat, clipboard under one arm, coming to tell me this was all a misunderstanding. The house stayed dark. After a while, I realized my phone was still in my hand. I opened the browser and started typing. Zapolyerny drilling accident. Old habit. Look for data. Look for confirmation you're not crazy. There it was. A tiny news snippet from weeks ago. Minor incident at construction site. No danger to public. No mention of the bit. Or the arms. Another story about a sinkhole in a village near Murmansk, likely due to old mine workings. A report about a collapsed parking garage in Nickel, substandard foundations suspected. Scroll, scroll, scroll. Suddenly, it was everywhere. Sinkhole in Siberia. Ground rupture in Kazakhstan. Mysterious crack in a Chinese highway caught on video by a passing car. Footage of asphalt buckling, people shouting in a dozen languages. If you didn't know what to look for, you'd write it off as coincidence. Aging infrastructure, climate change, anything, but the shapes were always the same. Circles and lines, neat edges, no rubble. Like someone was tracing a pattern under the skin of the planet and the surface was just giving way. I remembered what the gray coat had said back in that little office at Cola. It might be a product of stress and sensory overload. The brain finds patterns that aren't there. This wasn't that. The pattern was real. I called my daughter. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was calmer than earlier, but there was a tremor under it. Hey, Papa, she said. Please tell me you're not driving all the way to Moscow. It's late. Where are you? I asked. At Aunt Katia's, she said. She's making tea and pretending everything is fine. Stay there, I said. Don't go back to your building. Not for anything. Do you understand? She laughed nervously. What? You think the crack is going to swallow me? Yes, I said. The silence on the line was sudden and total. That's not funny, she said. I'm not joking, I said. Listen to me. If you feel the floor shake or you see a new crack anywhere, you move away from it. You don't stand there filming it. You don't lean over to look. You run. Papa, what is going on? She whispered. Is this because of that hole you worked on? The one on the radio with the screaming tape? I looked it up after we talked. I closed my eyes. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, thin and lonely in the cold. They're lying about the tape, I said. What they played on the radio, that's not what we heard. What we heard was worse. And it wasn't just noise. It was knocking. Knocking, she said. For 12 years, we drilled down, I said. Steel teeth chewing rock. Day and night. Do you know what that sounds like from the other side? She was silent. Someone banging on your ceiling, I said. Your floor. Your wall. Over and over. A signal. A question. We thought we were alone down there. We weren't. We were the idiots pounding on a door we didn't know existed. Papa. And something answered, I said. The line clicked. For a second, I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard breathing. Not hers. Not mine. Heavy, wet, dragged through too many throats. Hello, I said. Tanya. Static. Then my daughter's voice, faint under the noise. INGU. Papa. I can't hear the line. Her words broke up. Underneath them, something else laughed very softly. Tanya, I shouted. Hang up. Get away from the phone. Get away from the walls. The call cut completely. Just dead air. I stared at the screen. Call ended. My hand was shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. My reflection in the dark windshield looked like a stranger. Eyes too wide, face gray, jaw clenched. I could call her back. I could call Katia. I could call emergency services. I could drive to Moscow and probably die in a traffic jam on the M10 while the ground opened under us. Instead, I opened a blank note on my phone. I started writing, not because I thought I could fix anything, not because I believed anyone would swoop in and save us if I got the story out. That kind of optimism burns out quickly when you've watched a man write bleeding messages on rock walls. I wrote because I needed someone, somewhere, to know the truth. You don't get NDAs when the problem is solved. You get NDAs when the problem is too big to admit. As I wrote, snow thickened outside, blurring the world into smeared headlights and white noise. My car idled, engine rumbling softly. The warmth of the air vents felt like a thin barrier, laughable against what I knew was under my feet. We thought the threat was the drill site, a single wound in the earth we could stitch shut. We sealed Kola. We sealed Zapolyarny. Nickel, the shaft near Murmansk, the well my daughter's building sat on. We threw steel and concrete and bureaucracy at them, like sandbags against a rising sea. We never asked the right question. What if that first hole wasn't the only way up? Whatever we woke doesn't need our shafts and minds anymore. It knows the way now. It follows the sound of our cities, the vibrations of trains and factories, subways and jackhammers, thousands of little drills and pile drivers, and pounding human feet. We taught it that the crust isn't solid, that it can be chewed, that there's something delicious walking on the other side. You think that's dramatic? Listen, turn everything off in your house. Your fridge, your TV, your music. Sit on the floor. Put your ear down. Do you hear it? Until you can answer that question, don't tell me I'm crazy. At some point, my car's fuel gauge crept toward empty. The thought of getting out and walking back to Volkov's to turn off his stove or lock his gate seemed so absurd, I almost laughed. I wasn't going back in that house. Not ever. My own apartment was 50 minutes away. My duffel bag sat on the back seat, looking pathetic. Socks, underwear, passport. As if any of those mattered anymore. I started the engine again and turned the car around. Not toward the city. Away. Into the countryside, where the lights thin out and the dark is thicker. It bought me some time, I told myself. That was all. Distance and denial. Maybe the cracks hadn't reached that far yet. Maybe the ground under those empty fields still belonged to itself. I drove until my eyes ached and my back screamed. I stopped once at a gas station, the fluorescent lights humming, the clerk scrolling his phone behind bulletproof glass. He barely looked up as I filled the tank. Quiet night, I asked, just to hear another human voice. He shrugged. It's never quiet, he said. You feel the shaking earlier? Thought we were having an earthquake. Yeah, I said. Me too. He snorted. In this country, if something swallows us, it won't be the earth. It'll be the tax office. I forced a laugh. It came out wrong. Back in the car, the radio flicked on by itself, some glitch in the old wiring. A talk show host was rambling about mysterious global sinkholes and internet hysteria. Someone called in to say they'd heard screaming from the sewers. The host made a joke about mutant rats. I turned it off. Now I'm parked on a side road somewhere outside town. I can see the glow of distant lights on the horizon. My phone battery is in the red. The engine is off. It's just me, my breath fogging the windshield and the low, steady vibration coming up through the tires. Yes, even here, I thought getting away from the city would help. It doesn't. The ground is one piece. A crack in my basement and a hole in Volkov's kitchen and a rupture highway in China and a water main break in New York. They're not separate incidents. They're symptoms. We didn't stop drilling cola because of high temperatures or lack of funds. We stopped because we finally understood that the sound of our bit chewing 12,000 meters in a rock wasn't just noise echoing in a void. It was a knock, and something on the other side realized we have doors everywhere. Mines, tunnels, metro systems, basement floors. The little pilot holes construction crews drill every day in every city. We've spent centuries putting straws into the earth. We thought we were sucking resources out. We were opening channels in. If you're reading this and you feel your floor vibrate, if you hear scratching in your walls or see a crack that wasn't there yesterday, run. I know that's pathetic advice. What do you run when it's all below you? But your instincts exist for a reason. They kept us alive before we had building codes and geophysical surveys. If the dog won't go down into the basement, don't make it. If your glass of water is rippling on the table and the news says there's no quake, don't laugh it off. If a crack in the ground smells hot and wet and wrong, like blood and stone dust and rust, don't lean over it with your phone. Move. I don't think it will save you in the long run. I'm not sure anything will, but maybe, just maybe, you'll buy yourself a few more days. Enough time to call someone you love. Enough time to apologize. Enough time to sit in your car on the side of a dark road and write down the worst thing you've ever done, like I'm doing now. Because that's what Cola was. We woke it up. We dug for 12 years, and every centimeter we drilled was another little wrap of knuckles on its ceiling. That night, when the laughter came up the shaft, I remember thinking very clearly, we sounded happy too once when someone answered the door after we'd knocked for a long time. We taught it what knocking means, and now it's polite enough to return the favor. I can feel it under me right now. The vibration is stronger than when I started writing. It's not constant. It comes in waves, like something huge is moving in slow surges. The steering wheel trembles minutely under my hands. The rearview mirror quivers, making the dark road behind me blur. My phone buzzes. For a second, my heart jumps. It's her, it's my daughter, she's okay. It's a push alert. Breaking news. Massive structural collapse in central Moscow. Multiple residential buildings affected. Authorities urge residents to remain calm and stay indoors. Stay indoors. I repeat aloud and start laughing. The laugh dies quickly. There's a sound now that isn't the engine, isn't the wind. A faint, distant chorus carried up through gravel and frozen dirt and the thin metal shell of this car. If I turn the ignition, I can drown it out. For a while. I don't. I sit here in the dark listening. It starts as a murmur. 100 voices whispering all at once, too low to parse. Then the pitch rises, swelling into that awful, unified chuckle I haven't heard in 30 years. It's the same laughter from the speakers at Cola, only closer. I realize my hands are clamped over my ears. It doesn't help. The sound isn't just in the air. It's in my bones, my teeth, the fillings in my molars. The car rocks gently. I don't want to look. I look. The asphalt under the headlights is intact. Frost crystals glitter. The snowbanks on either side of the road sit undisturbed. But the surface breathes. That's the only way I can describe it. Tiny shifts, rises and falls, like a sheet lifted by something underneath. The laughter crests, and then, very clearly, I hear counting. Not from under Cola, 12 kilometers down. From under me. 43. 43. The number punches straight through me. I say it aloud without meaning to, like an echo. It counts down. 42. 42. The last time I heard those numbers, they were counting the people in the facility. They knew exactly how many of us there were. I don't know what they're counting now. Cars on this road. People in this district. Heads in a radius around Kola, or Moscow, or the crack in my basement. Sorak Odin. 41. Each number is a step closer, a grip found, a handhold taken. I imagine 1,000 arms bracing against rock, muscles like cables, pulling bodies up through stone like we pull rope through our hands. Trit sat deviate. 39. My phone screen goes dark as the battery finally dies. The interior of the car is suddenly black, the weak glow from the dashboard the only light. The silence after the little shutdown chime is immense. Outside, the road buckles. Not dramatically, not a Hollywood earthquake, cars flying. Just a slow rippling that makes the horizon tilt. The tires sink a centimeter, rise again. There's a soft cracking sound, like ice breaking on a pond. Trit sat, Vosum, 38. I could drive. I could throw the car into gear, foot to the floor, chase the horizon until the engine seizes or the road opens under me. I sit there instead, hands on the wheel, heart hammering so hard it hurts. I think about Dimitri, 200 meters down, fingers worn to bone, trying to climb deeper. I think about the words on the shaft wall. They heard. I think about the message on Volkov's kitchen. We heard you too. We knocked. They heard. Now they're knocking back. Drídsat 5. 37. The crack I left in my basement this morning will be wider now. 3 meters, maybe more. Big enough for something to squeeze through. The thought hits me with a strange, detached clarity. I'm not going back to sea. I won't tell you to be brave. There's no bravery in this. No heroism, just physics and meat and time. I'm not writing this to inspire you. I just need you to know. When the news tells you a building collapsed because of shoddy construction, maybe it's true. Sometimes a rotten beam is just a rotten beam. But if you hear laughter coming from the ground, don't ask questions. Don't lean closer. Don't wait to see what's coming. Because I've seen what waits in the dark under 12,000 meters of granite. And I promise you, whatever story you tell yourself to sleep will be kinder than the truth. Trit sat, she is 36. The numbers keep falling, patient and inevitable. The road under me shivers, little pebbles ticking against the undercarriage. They're counting something. Maybe all of us. Maybe just me. Either way, the countdown has started.